It's Wizards versus Lesbians, a podcast for your ears. Hello and welcome to Wizards versus Lesbians. My name is Isaac.
I'm Alexis.
And today we are discussing Daughters of a Coral Dawn by Catherine V. Forrest.
Indeed, from 1984.
Yeah, this is a retro episode. Would you like to do the plot?
Sure. So after a spaceman brings home his alien bride who has enormous boobs, this is very important. She has 9 children, all of which have a gajillion children of their own, and soon Earth has about 6,000 mostly lesbian hot alien chicks.
Exclusively lesbian.
Well, I mean, some of them, they get married to men, but that does seem to be mostly for reproductive purposes. So yeah, they're all lesbian. And they decide that the incredibly sexist patriarchal Earth does not appreciate their formidable intellectual and creative talents. And so 2/3 of them steal a spaceship and jet off to a far off planet, which has the aforementioned Coral Dawn, so that they can have their happy alien lesbian separatist colony.
Yes. This is a lesbian separatist utopia book.
Yes.
They all follow the same basic pattern, which is that the lesbians form their own colony, and then men show up to ruin it, and they have to decide what to do about that. And
yes,
different iterations of this story come up with different solutions to this problem.
Yes.
So, are there wizards in this book?
No, not really.
Not really. No. This is more of historical interest.
This is a retro episode. This is proto Wizlas.
Yes, indeed. I think I would be hard pressed to find a wizard who isn't Mother.
Yes.
And lesbians, are there lesbians?
There's an entire planet full of lesbians.
There's so many lesbians. There's an almost uncountable number of lesbians in this book.
Well, no. We know that there's roughly 10,000 lesbians on the lesbian separatist planet, plus however many lesbians have been left behind on Earth.
Yes. The demographics are very carefully noted. Be wary of people who like to keep lists of distinguishing features. They might be aspiring eugenicists, or they might be in marketing. Why should you read this book?
Historical interest.
That is correct.
Historical interest. Also, if you're the sort of person who finds things that, who gets amused to see something really lean in all the way to its aesthetic, particularly when it's a retro thing, then this is a great example of that.
It is very much itself. That much one can say for it.
It is very much of its era.
Yes, and in that there's a certain sort of poignancy to it.
I mean, it's reasonably entertaining. Like it's at no point is it good, but at least it doesn't drag too much. I mean, it does drag in places, but at least it's short.
At least it's short. Yes. No. And I would say that it's also useful because if you want to know how radical feminism got to where it is today,
yes,
you could do worse than reading a book like this from 40 years ago. And
no, this is a very useful historical text. And in fact, going back and rereading it really made me feel like I understood Sappho's Bar and Grill a little bit better.
Oh yeah, there's definitely a direct line from the one to the other here. So, and also you get a certain degree of sympathy for it, which might be when you see modern examples of this, it's just like what is going on, Mm-hmm. But with this one and with the stuff that it's reacting to, like in the present or very recent past rather than in the past, it's much easier to sort of see the through line and to feel sympathy.
Yes.
And,
even if I gotta say, this does not make a particularly compelling case.
Oh no,
for lesbian separatism.
No. But nonetheless, it elicits a different sort of reaction in me than the contemporary examples of the same sort of ideology.
Yeah.
Also, despite everything, the central romance is kind of cute.
Absolutely.
As to why you shouldn't read it.
Well, for one thing, it's a lesbian separatist utopia book, and it's just, like it really hates men.
Yeah, it really does. Again, I found it harder to take it personally than with some of the more contemporary ones, but
right, because to some degree, it really hates the men of the 70s and 80s.
Yes, exactly.
It doesn't seem to be aware that straight men exist, that gay men exist.
Yes, that is a bit strange. It has also has mistaken men of the 1970s and 80s for a sort of undesirable caste that should be eliminated from the world.
Yes,
which is that's kind of a problem.
Yes, I mean, yes, no, like it's also advocating for eugenics. And it's really eugenics, because all of these women, with one exception who shows up halfway through the book, are, very, like, they're special specifically because they have this one shared mother.
Yeah. You hear people talking about, like, how did radical feminism get co-opted by the right wing? And it was always there, folks.
Right. I mean, we can dig more into this, but so much of the gender essentialism. This is another good example. We can bring in that Ursula K. Le Guin quote again.
Yes, we certainly can. But that's like, there are landmarks on this planet named after the people who should be your guideposts on that particular journey. It's not difficult to suss this one out. Although I am upset that they only managed to make like one of them a pun, and they just sort of gave up for the rest of them.
Which one is a pun?
Oh, Radcliffe Falls.
Yes,
Radcliffe
okay.
Fall.
I'm not sure if that's a pun or just... I don't know.
And Vivian Lake is just named Vivian Lake, I think, but that's another story.
Okay, no, that's a good point. So they managed to.
No, I think it's actually Vivian Gornick, which takes the pun total back down to 1. But regardless, this is not a book that I can recommend reading for any reason other than sort of social political investigation.
Yeah.
But having said that, shall we get into content warnings?
Sure. There's attempted rape. Mm-hmm. And there's all the political stuff we just brought up, like eugenics and... Yeah.
I mean, I would not often put misandry in here, but it's like, it's kill 'em all, basically, is the conclusion that it comes to, and that's pretty extreme.
That's pretty extreme. Also, there's some sort of well-meaning racism, this is definitely very much...
Oh, it does exactly the same thing as Daughters of Chaos did, which is like pretend that race doesn't exist and just, talk hornily about the skin color of various women.
Yes.
Presumably the lesbians picked their males for genetic diversity.
Yes.
When they were, touching off the population boom here.
Yes, but you'll note that most of but basically all the characters who are named and doing something interesting in the book all are white.
No, it is extremely sexist, and it avoids being racist in its eugenicism only sort of by occasionally noticing that there are Oriental, and that's the word it uses, women or women with chocolate colored skin. So
yes.
There's a lot of alarming stuff about children, sexualizing children, and...
Oh, yes! No! That's right! No! That's right. I was totally going to bring this up, and then I got sidetracked, but no,
there's so much else to talk about.
There's a lot of sexualization of teenage girls.
Yes. And so, and like, again, we can just check things off a list of qualities of utopias.
This is right. I mean, there's a reason why we covered the Darkover books.
Yep. So let's get over to the spoiler zone and just start digging into that.
All right.
I'm afraid we're underselling the degree of pedophilia here. And the incest. We forgot to mention all these women are related. The fetishes of the author are on display and presented as virtues. It's hard to take next to the genocidal wraith, but so the story goes. It's daughters of a coral dawn. Daughters of a coral dawn. Welcome to the spoiler zone. So, what do you need for your utopian colony? You need free love.
Sort of. This has free love ish. Most of the pairings are monogamous, or at least it's and many of them long term.
Yes, but serial monogamy seems to be the norm, and there's no such thing as divorce. You can just get married as many times as you want.
Yes.
You need...
but there's no such thing as divorce, but like, it does seem... But I don't think I recall any polyamorous couples, or polyamorous thruples or groups or whatever, in this book. Like, people, and all of the couples pretty much, there's Venus, who's a serial monogamist and who the narrative kind of slut shames for it. Everybody else ends up in their relationship, and like ends up fairly happily, stably partnered with children. Every named couple, other couples, can split up, but the ones who are worthy of names and viewpoints never do.
Well, that actually brings us to the second quality of our utopian colony, which is communal raising of children. You have your own kids, but they don't live with you. They sort of live in the creche.
Yeah.
And we have.
Well, they live in the creche on the spaceship. Do they live in the creche off the spaceship?
I think that it's generally, as far as I can tell, I mean, there's very little detail about what people's home life is actually like, because that's not what the book is concerned about.
Right, and at the very end, you see Megan and Laurel's kids are with them at the Olympics, so the lesbian Olympics.
It's not like, no actual deparenting utopian colony. It sort of goes halfway on that one, but is sort of.
It does explicitly state that they decided that children need many, many adults in their lives, and so.
Yes, in more ways than one, and we note that there aren't very many polyamorous couples here because that isn't the author's kink. The author's kink is age gap.
Yes, every single relationship in this has age gap. And obviously, you and I are not in a position to criticize age gap relationships. But
oh, absolutely not. However, when you keep hitting the button over and over again,
right.
one's eyebrow starts to become raised, perhaps.
Right. I think like 14 years is the closest age gap.
Yes.
Of course, part of this is because of the setup of the book, right? So, in fact, also, all of these relationships are at least somewhat incestuous.
Yep. Oh, well,
because
we should have put that in the content warnings.
Yeah, we actually should go back and add that to the content
all of these
warnings.
lesbians are related.
Right, all these lesbians are related because they're all descended from Mother, this one alien.
Within 2 generations, incidentally.
I think they go up to 3.
Yeah.
I think it's up to 3, and so there's a lot of aunt and niece or aunt and grandniece or, cousin and cousin once removed relationships.
Mm-hmm. But I'm just going to put out there that the children tend to wear the tunics of the ephebe, which is also what...
Right. That's right. That's a little on the nose.
What the main love interest wears. Yes. And a child is described as a lithe, dark-skinned nymph at one point. And
also their Olympics are conducted
nude.
nude, because this is the Lesbian Olympics, and the champion, the champion girl who's only like 15 or 16, and boy does she get talked about, and everybody is ogling her, and it's actually really creepy.
Yeah, this author is also big into tits, as you might have noticed from Mother's Cantaloupes.
But by the time she gets old, they're down to the size of grapefruits.
It's tragic. That's the opposite of how that usually works, incidentally. But she's an alien, so who knows? So there is. On an upcoming episode, we and a guest discuss Pale Fire by Vladimir Nabokov. We think it's a pretty good book, and he's a pretty good author. And I mention this because I don't want you to think that we think that the inclusion of problematic content is bad per se. That's not the point we're making. And frankly, the current moral panic about age differences in relationships is super overblown. But anyway, as with anything, there's a right and a wrong way to write about sex. And not having the slightest notion that rhapsodizing about the pubes of a naked 15-year-old might be a problem, happily going along with the long-standing historical conflation of homosexuality with pederasty, that is a problem. It's an extremely uncomfortable atmosphere just from the get-go. We'll put it on that. But this is this person's idea of paradise.
Right. I will note, they're not only ogling our teenage Olympic champion's tits, they're also ogling her pubic hair. It's very uncomfortable. Really, this should be made more apparent in the content warnings.
Yeah, no, there was just so much to get at that, and I was distracted. But I'll do a little bit of editing to make a little bit more sense. But also, our dread empress, she's like, I don't need to be, she's like, I have feelings for a woman. I don't need to be counseled into how to, start a sexual relationship with this woman. I'm not 7. Right. So, just infer things where you infer them. Now, let's talk about Megan. First of all, the build up to her name is incredible.
Yes, because it's just there's all this buildup about this, incredibly brilliant scientist. Also, I will note that this is very much advocating for a society run by engineers.
Yeah, no, Megan dresses like Steve Jobs. Although actually she dresses like she's in Duran Duran because it's the 80s, but
yes, no one else is allowed to, after they decide that Megan should only wear black and white, no one else is allowed to wear black or white. Yes.
And I think that there's a case to be made that, in fact, I should have put this in why you should read this book, is that buried in here, there is a kind of a sweet romance between two extremely autistic women.
Between Laurel and Megan, or between Minerva and Krista?
Laurel and Megan.
Okay, yeah.
Although that is a good point. That is a point you make there, because almost every character in this book who isn't Mother or Venus talks like they're how shall I put this?
There's not a ton of I gotta say that the character voices are not super differentiated here.
But it's more so in Megan. Megan is like the nucleus of. First of all, she's like the only virgin on planet Lesbian.
Yes.
And she is, because she's never had time for sex, and she speaks in these incredibly, composed, complete sentences. This is probably also just a product of the audiobook that I listened to, where most of this dialogue is delivered in complete, flat affect. This is the Vulcan, this is Data kind of, kind of a delivery. And that may be partially the choice of the acting, but it certainly brings out that quality in the text.
Yes.
But I must circle back to the fact that everybody in this book is named like Minerva or Mnemosyne or, Venus or Demeter or Hera or
Well, the first 9 children, the first 9 daughters, mothers like that first generation are all named after either Greek or Roman goddesses. And actually, this is the reason why you shouldn't read this book, is that they are inconsistent. Pick Greek or Roman.
I'm glad that you said that, because I felt that I was being pedantic about that, but it's extremely annoying. But
why do we have Hera but also Vesta?
I mean, there's also an Isis in there, so there is an Egyptian in the first generation as well.
That's true, and an Olympia. So okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like they were so close to being on theme, and then
yeah, but then like when we were like, okay, who will their leader be? It's Megan, and that's the first like Megan type name that we've come across at that point. So it drops like a brick, and it's really funny.
Right. It is hilarious.
But yes, Megan is an engineer, and she is space Steve Jobs.
I just would like to note that we do have an autocratic society run largely by people with engineering training. It's the People's Republic of China.
Yep.
Like, I'm just not convinced that because also Megan is not elected. Megan is chosen, and then someone's like, well, but what about democracy? And someone else is like, that can wait till we get on the planet. And then we get on the planet and we skip 14 years in the future. And not only is Megan still dictator, she has a giant mural. This really is like China, actually.
Yeah. And it's like, there are many examples in the real world of how this is not how you make a utopia. Iran is run by people who all have PhDs, Although these PhDs may be in the social sciences, which the book calls the most gentle of the sciences, which, given how much colonial murder they've justified over the years, is certainly a take. And of course we have our own Silicon Valley to think about. But our lesbian utopia is run by a charismatic dictator, who
the only a charismatic dictator who, well, we're told she's charismatic. I will note, she does not actually in any way seize power. They just sort of pick her because, she's really good at engineering.
No. When I say charismatic, I mean that she's incredibly beautiful.
That's true. She is incredibly beautiful.
She is incredibly beautiful. She is attractive. She is slender. She is slim. She's slender.
Yes.
She has a pronounced bone structure. She's slender. She has slender fingers.
Right.
She's really slender. And she's like self-conscious about how she doesn't have giant tits, but she's slender.
Yep.
But anyway, there are no fat people on Planet Lesbian, incidentally.
Of course not. They, those giant boobs are all natural and naturally go with wasp waists.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, but Megan's real qualification for leadership is that she's bad at saying no.
Yes, she lets Mother bully her into this, and actually that does bring up, there might be another reason to read this book, which is because there is a counter reading present here. And that counter reading is in the giant serpent, who lives on this planet and is like the first peril that they run into.
Oh yes, Gem.
Yeah, probably the only peril that they actually run into throughout this whole thing.
That and the wind.
And the wind. Yeah, well, I mean, the wind imperils them once.
That's true. And then after
and only barely.
Right, which is, you'd think that if there's this deadly wind, like, there'd be more accidents. But no, somehow the lesbians are just really good at avoiding, the deadly windstorm that happens every single night.
Yes. They do encounter a plague later, but they manage to beat it before it kills more than like 100 of them. But this serpent is, the whole thing about the serpent is that it, besides being a giant phallic symbol, but that doesn't fit with this reading, so we can put that aside. But it has these hypnotic green eyes. And who else has?
Just like Mother and Megan.
And she draws people into their doom because people can no longer think and are just incredibly attracted to those eyes when they see them. And there is because the end of the book implies that this lesbian separatist colony is about to, at Mother's behest, go back to Earth and presumably perform massive genocide on all the men on it. and I'm not exaggerating. I'm pretty sure that's what's being set up here.
I mean, I'm tempted to check out the sequel just to find out if that's what happens.
But
that is certainly what the narrative appears to be setting up.
They've definitely laid the groundwork for that, even if they do something that avoids it. Because I was, we have like the dilemma of what are we going to do with these dudes, right? And I was thinking they're going to avoid the question by letting them, with their own hubris and foolishness, letting them blunder into their own death, presumably at the hands of this serpent.
Right? That would have been so much better.
And it also would bring back the serpent that gets brought up and then dropped.
Right. Right.
This book is also poorly constructed, I should add.
Oh, the pacing in this book is terrible. I mean, you get this, you get this cute little romance between Minerva, the historian, and Krista, the, much younger woman who she's nursing back to health from the plague. But like, instead of this being threaded throughout part 1, or, at least through several chapters of part 2, it all happens like in one chapter. Mm-hmm. Every single, with the exception of Megan and Laurel, which does happen over the course of part 2, every single major event in this book happens within a chapter, and then we move on to the next major event. There's no continuity.
The climax of the book happens 90% of the way through with it, and the last entire 10%
is just porn.
And a wedding, and then more porn.
Yes.
But then that sort of mirrors the arc of this civilization, which is very proud of how pornographic it has become.
Right, there's like pornographic lesbian art everywhere. Actually,
well, specifically in the halls of government.
Right, but see, that is another reason to read this book. Is that the scene where Megan is taking Laurel, the one woman who was on the spaceship, the Earthling spaceship that has gotten stranded on this planet. And, so Laurel has been invited off the spaceship and is allowed to hang out with the lesbians because she, too, is beautiful and probably a lesbian, they've decided correctly. And so Megan is like giving Laurel this tour of the halls of government, and it's just each new artwork that they pass is escalatingly pornographic.
Yes.
Like, it's really funny.
Now it's important to note that there is no sexual assault on this planet. It's completely unknown. Women can't rape, women can't pressure other women into sex. This is the planet that Venus lives on, and the planet where you are exposed to, where all of the children, compete naked, and you're exposed to this pornographic imagery wherever you go. But it's impossible for women to be sexually predacious.
To be fair to Venus, I feel like the book kind of slut shames her.
It does, but she's...
Like, there's no reason why Venus necessarily is more likely to rape anybody than one of the other women.
Yeah, I just want to say that despite all of the incredibly beautiful and alluring 80-year-olds who managed to get these 20-year-old women to sleep with them through sheer charisma, and Venus is the most visible example of that, but certainly not the only one. It is extremely important to note that there is no such thing as sexual assault on this planet until the men arrive.
Right. At which point, attempted sexual assault happens almost immediately.
The dumbest men who have ever lived arrive on this planet.
Also, one thing that's really funny about this, to the extent sexual assault isn't funny, blah, 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 but is that, she cannot let anything bad happen to any of these women. And so, first of all, the only woman who gets targeted is... Oh, no, that's not true, actually. Because it's a teenage girl gets targeted, and then also Laurel. So never mind, I take it back. But in both cases, they all have tasers and surveillance equipment because this is an autocracy. And so, things are stopped before they get too bad.
No, Heather, it's like there was probably a rape in progress with Heather.
Yes, that's right. I had forgotten about that.
Yes. These men are monsters because they have to be, narratively speaking. But
yes, they're also really dumb.
And they're incredibly stupid because the man who is caught by the panopticon trying to commit a rape and, and then is like, you do this again, you're going to get like super murdered, then goes in and does it again, which even the horniest of men, I think, could probably have chosen to keep it in his pants at that point. But that's not where we're going with, where we're talking about. What we're talking about is how the second one, the thing that decides them is that he puts a hand on this 15-year-old. Now, having a man put his hand on her is so traumatizing that she, after beating the shit out of him, first of all, because she was in no danger from him, because all of these women are super athlete Ubermensch or Uberfraulines, and can beat all of these men in single combat easily. After she beats the shit out of him, she goes into a fetal position, and it's explained that she's going to have to go through years of therapy to undo the stain on her soul from being touched by this man. And it's just a touch in this case. It didn't go any further than that. He put his hand on her. And then his hands are broken. Every bone in his hands are broken. And then he is killed in the most roundabout yet cruel way possible. And the reason that I bring this up is because we've talked about this a couple of different times, but like, how do you set a group of people up to be the subject of a genocide? How do you make a under race that needs to be destroyed? You have to make them simultaneously incredibly dangerous so that their very touch is polluting.
But also incredibly weak and defeatable. Incredibly
weak and stupid because they're vermin, they're animals, they're not actually people. And like, if you wanted a textbook example of how to set that up, the last part of this book will give it to you. For men.
Yes.
And I'm like, I understand, if I am a talented, like, literate lesbian woman in writing in the early 80s, and I've seen like what happens when Captain Kirk gets on the planet with the large boobed green women,
Mm-hmm.
And every story that I've been subjected to is all about like how women are weak and stupid and like the proper subject of male predation. I would also be angry. I would also be upset.
And, also that presumably many of her friends, she's seen, many of her friends who are smart, talented women stall out in their careers or be
sexually assaulted.
And be sexually assaulted.
Or be sexually assaulted, which because it is and was incredibly common. And
because, I happened to see a talk about the China studies in the U.S. just last week. And one interesting factoid was that when in the 70s and 80s, when everybody was mostly, you'd just be told like what jobs to apply to and you would get one of them, which that sounds like a utopia. But that yes. All the women all the women were told, well, you can do this library or that library. All the men were told this professorship or that professorship.
Right.
And so, I think it's not coincidental that all of these frustrated women all do have PhDs.
Yeah, no. And it's like, absolutely, the frustration is palpable, but it's like the seeds of the destruction of your own ideology come with the dehumanization of the people who are oppressing you.
Yeah.
And we've just seen how this has happened over the last decades. It's like being hated and treated like shit if you let it, turn you into a monstrous bigot yourself who is just waiting to be the one has a chance to get their hand on the gun,
Right. I mean, the thing is that if what you take away from looking at unjust systems is, wow, wouldn't it be great if I were the one in power?
Yeah. I could have all the kind of sex that I want to have with the people who I want to have it with. And, all of the people who I hate, I could torture and then explode.
I agree with you that there's a thing here where you can be like, I am sympathetic for the emotions that led you to this point, but what you're doing at this point is itself just so awful. Including just like, the idea that all of these women are inherently environmentalist.
Yes, that's one of the reasons that they can't just exile the men, is that the men would be a
All three men.
all three, as opposed to the 10,000 women, the three men who pose an existential threat and cannot even be allowed to remain on the planet, because their corrupting influence is so good. We can't send them off to one of the other hilariously named continents, because their mere presence would be enough to destroy the ecosystem, because they are not fundamentally naturally environmentalists like us Earth women.
To be fair, they're not really Earth women. They're half alien. Well,
When I say Earth women, I mean Earth Mother, nature
yes.
goddess, witch women.
Yes. I will note the planet is named Maternus. Like, this book is not subtle ever.
Yes, no, they live at the confluence of the Stein and Toklas rivers, near Radcliffe Falls and Vivian Lake, on the continent of Femina on the planet Maternus.
Yes, not to be confused with the continent of Nin, or
Yes. Oh, but I forgot Schlafly.
that's right.
Did you notice that Phyllis Schlafly gets a name check alongside these other women?
Yeah, but she gets somewhere really awful. Like, it's like the desert or the bog or like the poison bog or something of Schlafly. Like that was again genuinely funny.
Yes, no, that does seem like a little poke. Although I should mention that Radcliffe Hall was an anti-Semite and that Gertrude Stein was a Vichy Nazi collaborationist. So, what can you do?
Yeah, also note how many of the women who get lakes and rivers and continents named after them are white. Zero.
A really remarkable number of them are Nazis proportionally, yes! Which is just remarkable as far as like being able to pick that out. But, it's clear where this person's sympathies are in all of the Greco-Roman, glory of Western civilization stuff that's going on here, and the primacy of.
Yeah, in fact, there's a throwaway line about, before we formed our society of Maternus, Earth has had one true flowering of possible equality and hope, and that was America, and it didn't last very long. And it's like, are you talking about the American Revolution?
Yeah.
Because clearly you're not talking about America of the 1980s.
Yeah, no. Back when there was slavery, that's what they're talking about.
Right, exactly.
Before that withered on the vine. And, as with Daughters of Chaos, I should point out that these women have essentially gone to Space California. With all the sequoias and the sort of moderate stuff, and, being by the water and all of that.
And they set up vineyards. I mean, it's alien grapes, so they're not grapes, but they set up wineries. This is extremely Space California.
It's the same. It's the exact same thing. We are fleeing, we are fleeing the impure planet to start a new life in Space California. It's tough. This is a tough one. Although there are some cute, funny things. There are some good jokes. I think it's funny that when Heather. Is her name Heather?
Laurel.
Laurel, thank you.
Laurel Meredith. You can tell that she was meant to live on the lesbian planet because she has a woman's name as both her first and last name.
Exactly. She's extremely female.
Also, she has long flowing hair in her spacesuit. She hasn't even pinned it up so that you can have the moment where she takes off her space helmet and shakes her hair out and it cascades over her shoulders. Right, this is such a trope, and it's just really funny to see it because part of the point of the spaceship thing is that there's three men and one woman, and the three men, even the ones who the woman outranks, all she gets cut out of all their council. She doesn't get to make any decisions, and the men have all the power. But the woman is the one who actually knows what she's doing, and she's the competent one. And if only they'd listened to her advice, they would never have gotten stranded in this, on this alien planet in the first place. And yet, our hyper competent astronaut lady, has unbound long hair inside her spacesuit in free fall.
I mean, it's better not to think about the details.
I
Just
know,
as a
it's
general
just,
matter.
I understand that this is specifically so that you can have your shaking off, your beautiful shaking out your hair moment. But it really threw me out of the moment.
Indeed. I mean, and they say this is likely to start a trend on the planet because what they needed were femmes.
Right.
This planet lacked femmes, and she's arrived now because because Megan is a butch.
Megan is a bush, and so everybody's wanted to be like Megan, except for Venus, the predatory femme, who we'll note is mostly predatory in that she keeps flirting with Megan, and Megan seems interested, but doesn't respond, and so after a while, Venus hooks up with a different woman, and that is just this unforgivable sin from which, that just destroyed any chance Megan will ever love her.
Megan is super into it until Venus puts her hands on her, and she's like, "Oh my god, I can't love somebody who would just put her hands on me like that." So easily. What I need is another virgin so that we can have mind-blowing hours of sex as two virgins because we're both just that talented that we immediately can have mind-blowing sex with each other immediately.
Right, but it's also that Venus hooks up with Miri. It's like Megan's diary very explicitly says, somebody who would sleep, basically somebody who would have sex with someone else when she, while she's flirting with me, that's not acceptable.
Well, she fails to notice that Venus did that to make her jealous. Like that was on purpose.
Right, exactly.
Because she has no emotional intelligence despite being the leader of this entire colony. But anyway, Venus is there so they can go, women, huh? To other women. Where were we before we got to that? All right, we were talking about the person whose name is Laurel, not Heather. And I think it's incredibly funny that on a planet like there are literally 10,000 lesbians on this planet, and she finds the one useless lesbian.
Yes, well.
I mean, I understand that you have to do that if you're going to be writing a romance, but it's still extremely amusing.
That's true. And actually, that's a really interesting thing about reading this book, though, is that it's fairly, you can tell that this was written before useless lesbian became a trope.
Right.
Because the closest thing we get prior to, to this, even this romance, there's still very much, there's still a fairly fast building romance between Megan and Laurel. And, even with Minerva and Krista, where, Minerva's going, oh, would somebody this young and beautiful love somebody as old as me? It takes a page. And basically, as soon as Krista is recovered from the plague, she kisses Minerva and then is like, sorry, was that inappropriate?
No, every woman on this planet has a fetish for older women who they're related to.
Right, but also, none of them are useless lesbians. Yes. All of these women are perfectly capable of expressing their emotions except for Megan. And so it's really interesting because when you read contemporary stuff, by and large, none of the women are any good at, at expressing their emotions to their love interest. Either it's because it's their first relationship or because, they're autistic or whatever. But everybody is kind of a useless lesbian in today's writing. And that just in this book, everyone is perfectly capable, except for Megan, of expressing their attraction to other people.
I suppose that this is part of the nostalgia that folks feel for this period in gay history, right?
Right, because there's a thing where either you're closeted or you're in a gay space. And if you're in a gay space, then you know that all the women there are lesbians. And so, it's worth, you can try flirting with them.
Right, exactly. This is why the morning of the passing of the lesbian bar, because it was far easier to not be useless when you were at the lesbian bar.
Right. And so that is another way in which this is an interesting historical document.
This is true.
Unfortunately, it swings way too far in the other direction, and they're all kind of predatory. But
well, I hate to quibble with the nostalgia that a lot of folks feel for those spaces, but you think that everything that happened in there was super kosher and consensual. you know?
Right, exactly.
Particularly because these spaces were always going to be ruled by the older generation of people who had established them, you know?
Yeah, also, mostly they were also generally full of alcohol, so part of the thing is that you look at this and you can understand why people are nostalgic for those spaces, but this book, probably inadvertently, unless there's something going on with your counter reading, but probably inadvertently, this book is also giving you a pretty good explanation for why we don't have those spaces anymore.
Yes. Do you really need to go in and make the proper obeisances / sex acts to the 50 or 60-year-old women who establish and run the place in order to find a place there? Or maybe you want to go off and do something else. But
though again, I feel like you're tilting a little too far in the age gap relationships are inherently wrong, which you're not in a good position to do.
I'm not saying it's not age gap that is the problem. It's power imbalance. And
right.
Right,
but the thing is that power imbalance and age gap aren't necessarily going to be the same thing in this era, because you have a lot of late in life lesbians.
I suppose that is true.
Like you have a lot of people who are coming out at all ages, and so some of these it's funny, you don't see that in this book, but you can have a relationship where the younger person has been out for years and the older person is a divorced woman with adult children.
I mean, that sounds pretty hot. I mean, we need some more of that kind of stuff in here. But the problem is that everybody's already out already, and there's no telling. There's nothing in the stories about how we got that way, because the stories of the opinion that any woman given a choice with a clear outlook on life would be a lesbian.
Right, but also no, the way that we got this way is that all these women are meeting at their family reunion because they're all related.
Yeah, we don't have to reach the age gap to.
And if you go to the family reunion and all the women are hooking up with each other, so
yeah, that happens in like the first chapter. Incidentally, it really just primes you for what's coming next.
Yes, they call it their unity.
They do indeed.
Yes, so this is just a stupid nitpick, but there are only so many times that I can hear pubic hair described as moss before it starts to get weird.
Everybody's very damp on this planet.
Right! Yes, obviously the lesbian separatist planet, everyone's going to have pubes, but, and the thing is, saying moss once or twice would have been fine, but that's pretty much the only word she uses. And she really likes describing pubic hair. So all of these women are just incredibly mossy.
There ensued an exegesis about cunnilingus logistics, which I've edited out. I was going to say that this is not the only lesbian separatist utopia book that I've read.
We read the Darkover trilogy. We read the Renunciates trilogy.
Yes, but there was also a short story, which unfortunately I don't remember the name of, I think that I read in one of the James Tiptree anthologies. And it was funny to me because it's pretty much exactly the same setup. It could, in fact, be a reaction to this, for all I know. But the women on this planet are all leather dykes who drive motorcycles. And it really just does drive home that even like this story, not only does it make a lot of assumptions about what men are, but it makes a lot of assumptions about what lesbians are, right? This is supposed to be the lesbian utopia, and they're all into the same thing, which are older women in lab coats and positions of power. You know? Right.
To be fair, the older women all look super young.
Yes, exactly. But like, but there aren't any like, leather dykes on this planet.
There's one like muscly butch.
Yes. But you could there's such a variety. That's the problem with trying to set up a utopian society based on one person's preferences,
Right, like all with the exception of our one muscly butch, like all these women are either extremely slender or curvy. But like, curvy, but hourglass curvy with a small waist.
Exactly. But not even just in terms of like physical build. The thing about flattening the enemy is that you tend to flatten yourself in
right, because you're defining yourself in opposition,
and it doesn't do you any good either in the long term, you know.
Right, like, you know, the vast majority of these women are into STEM. We get a historian and an artist and a musician, though the musician is also an astronaut. And you know, and everybody's super fit, and everybody wants to live in harmony with nature, and
yes,
and of course this could just be because they're all related, but
yeah, these are family values that we're seeing at work here. The other thing, and that may also explain why they all talk the same. Possibly my favorite sentence in the whole book is when Megan is fighting the world's stupidest rapist hand to hand. She is like, and the rest of her cadre catches up with her. The person that she's like, took you long enough, and the woman is like, I want to get this correctly. You know very well that we were at a distance further away than you. Which serves as synecdoche for that particular way that people talk that I was discussing before, which, you know, you could charitably describe as stagey, and uncharitably describe as terrible. And so yeah, I think that's pretty much all that I've got. I've wrung my notes out here.
Yeah, I would like to note that there is a map in the middle. You gotta love a book with a map.
Mm-hmm.
It unfortunately it does not introduce. I was hoping that there would be more bodies of water named after prominent women, but there aren't. But it mostly just it marks all the important things, which are everybody's houses, the bodies of water, and the mural of Megan.
Well, yep, the mural of Megan is. I'll just end the podcast with the mural of Megan.
It's just, you know, which is described as this basically like giant cultural revolution style mural.
It's a shame that they don't get into like struggle sessions or anything like that. Like we could have really dug into the utopian stuff, but as we said at like the start of this, it kind of, you know, half-asses it. It's like it's also vegetarian utopia, but some of the women are like, but I could eat meat, you know, but it's still a vegetarian utopia.
It's a pescatarian utopia. But yeah, no, I would love to have read the struggle session that would happen in the society, because you know they have them. Oh, and actually, because there's this interesting thing where some of the women commit suicide, because, you know, you have to have some tragic deaths. But every single suicide is because they couldn't adapt to the planet. And again, there's definitely a counter reading there, because all of this is told in first person. Like everything is told either written by the historian, like as her records, or from the journals of Megan or Laurel. So you really could have your counter reading where, you know, like she mentions all of these, you know, tragic suicides and deaths. And it's not actually because they can't adjust to the world. It's because they're living in this kind of horrible panopticon lesbian autocracy.
Yeah, and then there's the plague that like only attacks the most physically powerful and strongest people, or like the people who might be the most of a threat to the social order. So, you know, you never know. I think there's definitely a reading to be had here, where this is all as sinister as it actually is, and that they know about it. I do want to maybe wrap up by saying, so we've had some fun with this, but like I think that it was a deliberate decision to veer away from the obvious way that these men were going to die,
right,
and to have murdering them be an open-eyed, considered choice that Megan makes.
Yes.
Murdering them in an extremely silly and convoluted way, but murdering them nonetheless.
And they don't even vote on whether or not to murder them. The council doesn't even vote on whether or not to murder them. The council votes to give Megan the decision.
Right, because it's important. It's important that this be like, it's important that an individual choice be made, and that choice be the choice of the leader. So because Megan has to deal with the moral consequences of that choice herself. And like, I think that one of you could sort of lean into it. That's like, oh, we need to make sure that there's an exploded spaceship out there so that if people come looking for us, they'll find that. But also, or if people come looking for them, they'll find that. But also, like, since they're about to go back to Earth anyway, that doesn't make much in the way of sense. I think it's just that they needed to get the bodies of these men off the planet because even their corpses would be a corruption. I think that it's important for the ideology of the book that this was how it was done. And then when Laurel is comforting Megan for, when Megan is feeling sorrow for having to take the sin of murder on her shoulders, Laurel straight up says to Megan, some lives are more valuable than others.
Yes. Right. And it's specifically that it's coming from Laurel, the only person who knew these men.
Yes. Who understood who lived with these men and understood them, and is like, your romantic feeling about men actually being human is not, it's just because you didn't have to live with them the way that I did. You should let this guilt go. And because of the place where that lands right before the 10% of porn that ends the book, it's the thesis statement of the book.
Yeah.
And, that if you are in any way opposed to the, mass slaughter of human beings, this should give you pause.
Yeah, if you ever find yourself saying some lives are more valuable than others, which is in fact verbatim the line,
yes,
on page 202 of the third edition, the Allison Press edition.
Yeah,
there's your citation, and then very specifically, and then Megan says there can be no justification, and then Laurel says, "Well, all of us agree with what was done. It's not even what you did; it's what was done." And then they have sex. The passive voice gets rid of the stain of murder, and they have sex. This seems kind of, it feels cathartic initially. It feels kind of, and it's fun, and it feels funny, but also, like, as much as we've had fun laughing about this stuff, it really does end by saying murder is justified.
Yeah, and it's like, it's actually a really sort of clear example of how you get from point A to point B with this stuff.
Yeah, like you can see this is laying the groundwork for turfism and all sorts of other incredibly awful places that, theoretically liberation-minded ideology can end up when you root it in dehumanization.
Yes. So there is that. And that's pretty much the note that I would want to end it on.
Yeah.
We fell in love with Megan so incredibly quickly. This beautiful woman tripped and fell into our lives. All the planets aligned. It left the world gripped. It was just an amazing surprise. She took charge on the day that we shipped out. It's okay. She's a smasher, perfectly suited to the role. Messages from the public. Thank you for all you're doing. We love you. You're just what Mother needs. You're going to change us. Never has one outfit been designed to send so many messages. White for sexual purity, black for Steve Jobs. Pants for the butches, velvet for the femmes. She's a new romantic. Adam and the magic of Megan.